Well, good morning, guys. I appreciate you joining me for Finance 309 this morning. We actually held this class session earlier today. Unfortunately, the video wasn't able to render. There was a bug in the file of some kind, and so I'm re-recording this. I'm going to be missing some of the value of having questions asked and being able to answer them during the class period. I'll try to include in my discussion examples that would cover those questions and answers to the best that I recall them, and I apologize if I miss anything. I'm also going to move to the beginning of the discussion an item that was actually asked about at the very end, and that has to do with one of the assignments coming up, and then looking at the next couple of weeks worth of assignments, and as we go through the class, because we're obviously nearing the end of our time together for this class. So let's go ahead and start with that. Let's go ahead and look at the schedule, the syllabus for just a moment. So as you can see by the syllabus, and that should be what you're seeing on the screen at the moment, over the next couple of weeks, we've got a few things going on. This coming Monday, we'll be looking at enterprise multiples and determining equity values, maybe even looking at something referred to as the G solution. We'll also go ahead and a week from today, or April 1st, we'll have a guest speaker. It'll be through a Zoom meeting, of course. That'll be Tom Lewis. And Mr. Lewis is the former CEO of Ameritrade. He sits on the board of the advisory board for the Gore School of Business and is a good friend of Ern Budvarsson. You may have heard him speak in some of the entrepreneurial lecture series discussions. As we then flow into the next week, we'll be looking at localizing the valuation discussion and the valuation equations. That means how we go from the great big firm perspective down to just maybe part of the firm and what things need to change. We'll also be looking at the concept of financial engineering, the stock repurchasing, and then that's going to take us to the point where we start to prepare for the practice final. The final exam will be based upon analysis and interpretation. And the way that we'll prepare for this is I have already created a study guide that has 15, maybe 17 questions in it, which questions are not quantitative, or they're largely not quantitative. They're mostly analytical and interpretive and giving you an opportunity to think a little bit outside of the equational construct that we've used so far. So I'll assign one of those questions to each one of you. And we'll also talk about those questions on that date, which again will be April 13th. That'll be a Monday. On the following Wednesday, I'll go ahead and ask you then to answer those questions for me. You'll have had a couple of days to think about them. If you think about it, the study guide's already online for you. You can look at it even now to try to begin to compile answers to the questions. But on that Wednesday, the 15th, I'll expect you to come to our class session prepared with an answer to the question that I assigned you to. And these answers aren't one or two word questions. They're barely even one sentence questions. Some of the answers to these questions will be multiple paragraphs. And so you'll have gone ahead and prepared them well. And then you'll give us the answer to that question or your opinion on this issue. As we then start class that day, I'll identify who had question number one. Let's say that it was Annie, and I'll ask Annie to give the answer to question number one. And then maybe Noah had question number two, and I'll expect Noah to give me the answer to question number two. And we'll move throughout the rest of our time together like that. We'll go ahead and have spent then 2 class periods preparing for this exam. And then when we come back into class on April 20th, I will actually deliver the exam to you. You'll have had the study guide. You'll have had some time to prepare answers to the questions on the study guide. You will have then been assigned the opportunity to answer your question to the whole class, as will other students. We'll get through as many of these as we can. And then by the time you actually come to the class session, if you will, on April 20th, you'll have quite a bit of preparation, and what you'll find will be those same 15 or 17 questions put in front of you as an exam. However, you'll only be responsible to answer 3 or maybe 5 of them that I will have selected. I'll select those same 3 to 5 questions for the whole class. It's just that you won't know which ones they are. I've already prepared my own answers to these questions, of course, and I'm not going to share them with you, and you'll understand why in just a moment. When we actually get to the testing experience itself, we're not going to have this as a regular test. We're not going to use Lockdown Browser, as I earlier said. We're not going to be proctored. It's not going to be a test in front of anybody seeing whether or not you're answering the questions asked, you're doing it in a way, you're maintaining integrity, etc. What you'll find is that on that day and time, you'll see a test in front of you on your screens. It'll be the 4 questions or so that I tell you that I'll select. And then you'll have a time frame in which you need to put together your answers and submit your answers via Canvas. It'll be 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. I haven't settled in on that, but once I do, I'll tell you what that number of hours would be. And then from wherever you are, knowing what preparation you already have in back of you, you'll then be responsible within the time frame allowed to answer the questions, and you'll submit them. Now, I recognize that this leaves open the possibility for you to have prepared answers to all the questions and then just have to copy and paste your answers into the exam so that you answer the requisite questions. I get that. Frankly, it's not ideal, but I think that to force anything else is yet less ideal. What I'm going to ask you is to be honorable and integrous in this. And specifically, that's going to be with respect to not using resources that you don't already have. So I don't mind if you prepare your own answers. I don't mind if you put your own answers into the exam. What I care about is that your answers are cohesive, that they knit together so they make sense together, and that they're your answers, which means I don't want you working together on this. I don't expect you to collaborate or collude. In fact, to the extent that I think that you are, I'll be disappointed by that, and the scores will probably reflect my level of disappointment. At any rate, that gives you an idea as to some of the next couple of weeks as we move through the schedule and look at some of the topics we're going to discuss. Let's go just a little bit further, though. Let's go ahead and look at the evaluation cases, which are the last part of the course. In the past, the day after the exam, I've gone ahead and introduced to you 4 relatively simple evaluation cases, and I've assigned 2 or 3 people per each of the 4 or maybe 5 cases. So there's a little bit of group work that's going to be done here. I'll assign them to you. I'll give you the information on each case. I will have expected each of you to have read each case, not just the one that's assigned to you, but each case, because you're going to get involved in some discussion with respect to these. We'll then go ahead and have that discussion. We'll talk about the different cases. We'll talk about problems that you see within them. We'll talk about issues that I see within them. And that will take us the majority of our time together that day. You then will have the responsibility between that day and the next class, which will be then Monday the 27th. You'll have the responsibility to coordinate with whomever you're working on this case with and come up with some questions that you might like to ask the CEO or the CFO of the company. I know much more about these companies than are detailed in the cases. And you should know that these are all actual live companies. And although they go by different names and some of the other details may be different, just for confidentiality's sake, it's possible that I may have 1 or more of the CEOs or CFOs of those companies on the Zoom meeting with us. I don't know if I can do that at the moment. As you can appreciate, businesses are scrambling at the moment just to survive, and these businesses are no different than any others. Lots of disruptions that are affecting all of us. But I'll go ahead, to the extent that I don't have the CEO or CFO present, I'll go ahead and answer your questions. And so you'll then leave that discussion that day with more information, more knowledge on that case. You'll then be responsible on April 29th, the last scheduled day for our class. You and whomever you're collaborating with on a given case will be responsible to present the case to us during our class session. Now, in the past, this has been live, of course, and so presenting has been an issue of having a few people stand up in the front of the room and talking to us about the case and looking at some of the outcomes, looking at some of the scenarios, maybe even asking other questions of the class to have a real conversation about this. Again, this is why I need everyone to be familiar with everyone else's case, because this is a participation issue. It's the last opportunity you're going to have to impress me with how participative you are. Some of you haven't been participative at all, and you need to move that needle rather a lot. This will be your last opportunity to do that and help capture some of that 10% of the grade that's participation based. So those that are responsible to present the case will do so within the Zoom environment. So you're going to have worked out together who is presenting what and how you're going to do this. But we'll do it from within the Zoom environment. We'll do it with the live video cast or the live webcast. In the past, I've also been able to bring barbecue and such to this last class. We've enjoyed this as we're talking and listening to these cases. I don't think I'm going to be able to pull that off this time. Maybe I can do something, but I don't know. But at this point, you'll be presenting and we'll be talking for our last class. Let me give you some detail with respect to my expectations of the presenting. This is a discussion. You do not need to bring into this specifics you do not need to bring into this PowerPoint slides. You don't need to bring into it handouts. You don't need to prepare anything other than you and your collaborators need to know the case, need to be able to answer some questions with respect to the case, need to come up with valuations and such as is requested in the case assignment itself. So that's what we'll do for the very last couple of classes, and that finishes out our semester. Now, with that said, you may notice on the syllabus, excuse me, it's not in the syllabus, it's within Canvas, so let me go to Canvas. You may notice in Canvas that due on Wednesday, April 1st, the same day that Tom Lewis will be speaking to us, is a course essay outline. And we've talked about this very little so far. We discussed it the first week or so of class for the course essay. We didn't talk about the outline at all, so let me talk about both for a moment. So I've gone to the assignment for this, of course, and you'll notice that the course essay is you preparing an essay on how the various models and metrics we've discussed in the class so far can be used in executive decision making at the firm level. You should choose a particular evaluation model. You have 4 to choose from: the free cash flow model, the KVD model, the APV model, and the forward market multiple model. And you need to choose one of those models, and you need to discuss it with us in the form of an essay, and discuss it in such a way that I can tell that you clearly understand the model, its inputs, and are able to connect some of the various elements of the model and maybe even others, and you're able to interpret its outcomes and maybe get a sense of, if you change certain inputs, how the outcomes will change as well. So you need to give a full fleshed out discussion of this, and you do it in an essay. That essay has to be no less than 1,500 words and shouldn't be more than about 3,000 words. If it's more than 3,000, it better be good. I've had these essays go to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 words. I actually had one individual a couple of semesters ago give me an essay of 8,943 words. And he contacted me in advance of submitting it and admitted it was much longer than I expected, wanted to know if he should cut it down or if he should submit it still. And my response to him was, well, he was welcome to submit it at the 8,943 word level, but it had better be good. It should be succinct, it should be complete, there shouldn't be any fluff in it, it better be really good, because I was going to have to read the whole thing. And in fact, it was probably one of the best essays I've read from this course. He certainly got an A because he just nailed it. And he went so deeply into each one of the variables, evidenced an extraordinary understanding, and I was pleased, impressed, and I was happy to have read the thing. So if you're going to be more than 3,000 words, you better make it good. I'm going to have to read these, and when I read them, you don't want me to be bored or bothered or annoyed, because I'm going to be scoring you right after having read yours as well. Also then, these are going to be due on May 3rd, and that's the very last date I can have it due and still have a chance of reading them and scoring them before I had to get grades in for you. So you're going to have some work to do. And the only reason I have a course essay outline assignment at this point due April 1st is to make sure that you're thinking about the course essay now and not waiting until 10 minutes before it's due, because I want you to get a strong grade. I don't want you to do poorly on this assignment. It's the part of the class where everything finally comes together and you get the evidence that you've understood every place we've been together. So this is an important assignment. The outline needs to be just that, an outline. It doesn't need to be paragraphs of prose or text. It simply needs to be an outline. It needs to be well constructed, just as your essay needs to be well constructed. Your essay should have an introduction where you tell us what you're going to tell us about. Introduce the model form you're going to use, introduce the scenario you're going to be discussing. It should then have a very well fleshed out body with paragraphs supporting what you've told us in the introduction. You then will have a conclusion, and the conclusion should be robust. You'll notice that in this assignment, I tell you, do not give me a skimpy conclusion. More people lose more points on this assignment because they get to the end and they give me a 2 or 3 sentence conclusion, less than a nicely fleshed out paragraph, and they just leave me hanging. The conclusion should be, easily 250 to 500 words. So that's way more than 1 or 2 sentences. 500 words is a fully typed out page if you're using 10 or 12 point font. So you want to give me a good, robust conclusion. This is where you connect all the dots. This is where you put all the elements together. This is where you help me understand that what you talked about in each of these paragraphs is supported and that you understand the outcomes of this. Do not skimp on the conclusion. If you do, it will be costly for you. So we've taken a look at the remainder of the course, give me an idea as to what to expect. Some of you are being more participative in the course than others. Those of you that are not and that are not attending the live sessions, you're missing out a great deal, including you're missing out on some participation points. I like to remind you that I've told you that participating in the live webcast is part of participation. So you should correct that behavior if you want to get all the points for that.